Okay, yeah. Alrighty. I want to make sure stuff is working, and I have not borked anything. It seems like things are working. It seems like I have not borked things, which is a nice sign half the time. Okay, yeah, cool. So I normally don't do these very like small intro things, stuff like that. I normally just get right into the stream, but today I do want to give time for people to kind of like trickle in a little bit. So we'll probably give like a small little 5-minute lead in, you know? That sounds about right. That sounds like a good number of time. The main idea that kind of we had today to kind of do this for the lead in is I really like making those Love, Death, and Healthcare series videos. So they're videos in which I essentially look at current administration's like wording and phrasings and actions on healthcare in particular, and specifically pharmaceuticals, because I'm PhD in pharmaceutical sciences nerd, or earning it at least. And I kind of talk about the overall resource, like, is this correct or not when comparative to the actual data? And while I really like doing those, I just don't have as much time to do them anymore. It just takes a while to edit, to get the sources and all of that. But the thing as well is it doesn't really help improve media literacy if you're relying on me to do it. So the main idea that I kind of had today was I wanted to go through and essentially walk people through the steps of how I would go through and verify something in a way that's more generalizable to non-scientists. Because you hear so much information about healthcare and policy and drugs, and it's oftentimes hard, especially if you don't know how to start and how to look, to delve into understanding what's true and what's fluff. And we're going to try to remove as much bias from this as we can. I know the thumbnail is big, catchy, current administration, but they're the ones setting the policy. So it very much affects the modern day. There are some things I will say that I'm very happy that they've done, and there are some things I'm not happy with. And we're just going to try our best to keep bias out of the situation and essentially just look at how you would go through and verify this yourself. There's probably gonna be a little bit of leakage of bias though, because I'm a PhD student. I think we're gonna give it like a little bit of time, but this as well works. It's not really like a planned thing. By that I mean I didn't sit down last week and plan this. I was gonna potentially talk about the ibogaine. Yeah, that's how you pronounce that, right? I think that's how I pronounce that. I'm not good at pronunciation. I apologize. I should be better about drug pronunciation, but I'm not. I was going to sit down and talk about the ibogaine stuff, and then I realized that instead of just talking about that one specific case, which is like in the headlines, I wanted to talk more about just media literacy. So this is going to feel, instead of like lecture-y, I don't have slides or anything like that, it's going to be a lot more back and forth with chat, as well as a lot more just walking step by step and like using the search engine and everything, which I feel like kind of works better when trying to explain science literacy than essentially just like, oh, here's some slides, have a little bit of lecture. I think in my opinion, it's nicer to actually walk through my own steps of doing it than it would be to just say lecture. I don't like being sat down and lecture to. I like to kind of have those interactions and those back and forth, and I think it's the most helpful. But yeah, at any points, if anyone has any questions, comments, hopefully constructive and or genuine questions, please feel free to ask. If they're not constructive or genuine questions, I probably won't answer them, but you never know. We're gonna give it like 2 more minutes before I start. I will say this figure I've seen so many times. So to give the little spiel before a little more yapping while I wait for like the 5 minutes to kind of give people time to trickle in. A little more yapping about what this figure is. This figure is going to be the drug discovery pipeline. I have seen it in so many of my courses, too many of them. This figure is like burnt into my brain. I was like, oh, I can just explain. And then I realized, no, it's nicer to have the visual for. So I had to go find, I didn't take the one from my courses directly, but it's like a really common version of this drug discovery pipeline. So we're going to be using this. The fuck is this? We're talking about science literacy today. Yeah. Like how to read publications, understand data. How do you, if you hear something, validate if that's true or not. But we're just doing the little preamble in the start of the stream, so welcome on in. Because I am a scientist, and I think that scientists suck at communicating to the general public, and the general public doesn't really know how to go through and read science. So we're gonna try to explain that a little bit in a like lecture-y way. Alrighty, I think we're gonna start. It should be pretty easy to kind of pick up, and like if people hop in later to figure out what the fuck we're doing, hopefully, if I'm talking. But I guess we're gonna find out. So, okay, let's start off very simple and very broad. The idea of science literacy basically means being able to hear something or read something and then actually investigate what's going on. So if someone tells you something like, oh, gravity is fake, you can go in and actually look up, the information on that, find actual reputable sources to go, no, gravity isn't fake, and here's why. Gravity is not a great example because oftentimes people will very much use what's called like, oh, I have a friend examples. Like, oh, I have a friend who did this and it worked great for that one person. And while it might work great for one person, you need to look at the broad scheme of things to actually get an understanding on if something is good or not. So science literacy is essentially just how well can you as a person understand and process the information you're being given, and how well, if you had to, can you research those to better understand it. My specific field and forte is in drugs or pharmaceuticals. I'm doing my PhD in pharmaceutical sciences with a focus on computational mechanisms. And essentially, oftentimes, most of the stuff I focus on is to be like healthcare related, which is pretty important, I would argue. But this overall idea of science literacy and kind of us walking through publications and doing a bunch more stuff like that is going to apply to any science field and not just healthcare in particular. Publications across all science fields, at least like life sciences or physical sciences, are pretty common in the way that they're done. So if you understand how to read in one field, you're probably going to understand how to read in another. Now, am I going to promise you that you're going to understand everything? No. Do I, as someone who's been doing my PhD for almost 4 years now, understand everything when I pick up a publication? No. But we're going to try to get you, at least as I like to say, enough to be dangerous. So, when we think about drugs, we oftentimes just think of drugs on the market. And since we're going to talk a lot about like pharmaceutics today and all of that, it's very important to kind of understand what we mean when we're saying like, oh, a drug is in study, or it's being studied, or it's going through the process. The process starts very broad with drug discovery. Drug discovery is essentially we throw a bunch of shit at the wall and see what sticks. The joke is like you're doing what's called target identification and validation. The idea is we have a specific thing we want to target. So in this case, let's say we're working on COVID, right? We want to target the infectious molecule of COVID, or the spike protein in this case. So we're going to test a bunch of compounds against that to see what sticks and what inhibits it. Drug discovery is a very, very big field. It's also like one of the longer non-clinical styles of like drug research. So this is oftentimes, you'll see like a bunch of different compounds that are getting screened and stuff like that. This is what you consider like high throughput. And that's not really important to understand for science media literacy. That's just me getting into the tism of liking to yap about drugs and all of that. But the idea that we go through is this is, like I said, a process, and this happens for all science research, and it's applicable to all science research. From the drug discovery, you move into what's called preclinical. Preclinical is what you think of like cell testing or like organ on a chip, or even animal studies. Preclinical is what's required before moving into clinical trials, which clinical trials basically just in human study. We want to make sure that the drug or the molecule or whatever we're studying is not going to harm humans, or at least are, to our very best knowledge, not have harm in humans and actually produce the effect that we want. Then you can get into clinical trials, and clinical trials are essentially where you test in humans. There's different phases where you go from healthy humans to your actual patient population to rarer patient populations. Not gonna get into that, a little too complicated for a stream like this. But at the end of all of this, you've gone from basically 5,000 compounds to 10,000 compounds to maybe one new drug. And it takes like 15 years to do this. Which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It's a long time. So the idea of a lot of stuff is how can we shorten this time frame while still ensuring that things are safe and efficacious. Words are hard. Show efficacy or efficacious. Efficacious? How do I pronounce that word? Basically effective. Like they're doing what we want them to do. So this is again very much just for like drug stuff. But the idea behind this is studies like this, and science especially, takes a long time. You might start an experiment and like a hypothesis of something, and it might take a year or two to actually fully understand it. It's not always that short, that quick of a time. It's not always that short of a time. It varies depending on the experiment and all of that. But to get like actual meaningful results, it's going to take time. Which is why you'll often hear people like say, oh, these are preliminary or early results. You start with small and work your way to large. And the reason I'm kind of showing the drug discovery pipeline here, outside of wanting to share my suffering for having to have memorized this so many times in so many of my courses, is because most of the recent news is kind of in this two main areas that I want to talk about. Because I think these are two that made really big headlines and that would challenge people's actual science literacy. And to kind of say what I mean by that is like, these are things that you're going to hear about or you've heard about. And if you're like me, probably wondered how true actually are these statements. Because you'll hear a lot of statements from a lot of different people, and determining how true those statements are is really important, as well as if you're having a discussion with someone else that doesn't actually believe in the science behind things. Now, the hard part is you can't really convince someone of facts and data if they just say the data's not real. There's sadly a certain level that you can argue things, but you can't argue with people's own like crazy beliefs. But recently there's been two main things that have come out of like this administration and the modern day discussion of science. The first one is specifically tied to the FDA, which is why we talked about the drug discovery pipeline, is a lot of these like unproven peptides. So I know the looks maxing community has talked quite a bit about these like peptides that aren't regular, like aren't actually like approved or anything like that, and have basically went like, oh yeah, these peptides are great for X, Y, and Z. But okay, cool. That's a claim they're making. So how do we kind of understand and validate that claim? So RFK Jr. It is the head of the Health and Human Services division, or is the secretary of the Health and Human Services division, and he's talked a lot about these essential, like, these peptides that haven't been FDA reviewed. And he's talking about this essential wanting to have the FDA ease up limits on unproven peptides. So this is one of the topics we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to leave this tab open. And this is one of the two examples we're going to go through on like how to properly go in and validate and understand publications like this. So we'll be talking about peptides, which, I mean, I feel like I don't know much about the looks maxing community other than I know that they do have a very big focus on peptides. The other thing to talk about is, and this is kind of what started me wanting to talk about or do this stream today, is the executive order on psychedelic drugs. Specifically Ibogaine. Ibogaine, yeah. Ibogaine is one that was pushed by like Joe Rogan and a bunch of other conservative people that were in that room that day when they were signing the executive order. So we have our two overall examples and our baseline, okay, here's stuff that we're going to hear. Here's things that we're going to claim. Both of the claims that are being made with ibogaine and the peptides are that they work great. They're fantastic. They claim specifically for like ibogaine that I know one of them was like, it helped me fight my demons of depression after like taking it for like 3 times unregulated. So there's a lot of people will make a lot of claims of like, oh, this helped me or this helped a friend. But there needs to be validity and data behind those claims. Hi, Rain. How's it going? So kind of talking with this ibogaine one, there's this big executive order that they talked about. It's the Trump is accelerating. Oh, this is a fact sheet? What the heck? I thought this was the executive order. Let me see. Can I get the executive order? Executive order. Can I get like the actual executive order? There we go. I don't want the fact sheet. I want the actual action. There we go. So it's accelerating medical treatments for serious mental illness. And we're not going to read all through this because it's a very long executive order. But the main thing is that they're essentially trying to say there's a lot of patients that suffer from mental illness, which is very true. And that current psychiatric medication is very variable and not always the most accurate or the most reliable. So this executive order is specifically telling the FDA to put a very big focus and maybe ease up on some of the psychedelic stuff. Oh, I forgot we have Twitch ads. We're gonna, whenever there's a Twitch ad, we're gonna do like self-care breaks. Because I'm gonna be talking quite a bit, and I'm gonna need to drink water. So whenever there's an ad, we're gonna do small little bits of self-care, okay, chat? And then we're gonna yap about other things. So I'm gonna have water, we're gonna have snack breaks, we're gonna like have restroom breaks and stuff like that during these small little bits of ads. Because I forgot that Twitch auto runs ads. But to kind of get back a little bit into what we're talking about here, this is one that was really interesting to me because as someone who works in pharmaceutical research and all of that, psychedelics are a very well-researched and novel therapy route, which is really cool because there's a lot that we can learn from them. Hi, how's it going? Anong? I'm so sorry on that pronunciation. So with this order, there's 2 main things that come from it. 1, actual psychedelic research, and 2, what's being pushed. So the main one that they were talking about, oh gosh, I gotta stop. Okay, wait, Twitch ad is still going. For those that are new here, we're talking about media literacy today. So we're teaching people how to read publications because publications are weird and hard. And scientists love to write in acronyms. As a scientist, I can confirm acronyms are fun. All right, cool. Twitch ads are over. Sick. So the main one that came up during this, because they do a press conference. Of course they did a press conference, and we're talking about the press conference in a little bit. The main thing that came up in this press conference is a drug known as ibogaine, which is a psychedelic drug derived from a shrub. You know what's funny? Most psychedelics are just plants. It's just like, yeah, what if we just ate a whole cactus, psilocin, and just went on a trip? It's like, okay, nature, cool. But they talked quite a bit about ibogaine. And they talked quite a bit about like, oh, ibogaine is great. It's lovely. It's beautiful. Can I get some ibogaine? Trump actually asked for ibogaine, which is very funny. And I kind of want to show a little bit of the press conference here.
Something that we're still studying.
We're going to get into the FDA claims later, but let me see.
5 people that,
Mr. President, works.
that had big problems.
Here we go.
Yeah, please.
It fixed my demonic
This
relationship.
is Rob.
Sorry, this is a crazy thing to like lead as a fact.
Indirect research, maybe the ultimate.
A lot of indirect
people that have
research.
taken it, because I've spoken to people that have taken it. Aside from the trail, both of them, I've spoken to 5 people that.
Mr. President, works.
That had big problems.
I've done it 3 times.
Yeah,
It works.
please.
It fixed my demonic
This
relationship.
is Rob O'Neill, who's a friend of mine and a great guy. Go ahead.
It fixed my demonic relationship with alcohol. It saved my life, and then it saved my wife. So every day is a blessing. It took about 3 years of, I did it 3 times. It's a different adventure every time. That's not fun.
So without it, you would have had problems.
I did it with, there was a Green Beret 28-year Sergeant Major that told me when we finished, make sure you tell Amber Capone, the CEO of Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, that she saved my life because I was going to kill myself next week. This was my last chance. I had a 28-year veteran tell me that.
Wild claims again.
Okay, good.
So like there was a lot of claims. We're not going to go through the entire 50-minute press conference because that's so long. But there's a lot of claims that they're making. And as a person watching this, do you just take those claims as facts? Because this is very staged and all of that. Though I will say one really good thing from this was, I think it was the FDA chair, or the person who's from the FDA's talk about this. I kind of want to show this as well.
Mr. Nolan Williams. When I was a professor at Stanford, I got to know him.
And this is the main paper is from Stanford too, so we'll talk about that paper.
The promise that it has for treatment-resistant depression and so many other conditions. Frankly, for me, I learned a lot. He unfortunately passed away last year. I want to thank this amazing team that just moved heaven and earth to get things done. I do want to emphasize this is something that we're still studying, and we have to keep studying. We have to figure out the right way to like make sure we administer it, that it's safe, that we don't just take it for granted. We already know everything, because we don't. And for the NIH and for ARPA-H, we are absolutely committed to making sure that we keep studying it, keep getting the best gold standard science on it. You see here Norvolka, who's my National Institute of Drug Abuse director. She's been an absolute hero in just developing scientific, so the commitment for American science to focus on this, and in many ways, it's that scientific advance that brought us to this moment. So thank you, President Trump.
But if it's good, we want to get it fully approved fast, right?
I mean, for the things that have great evidence, and that's what
Because, these studies, they go on for a long time, and if it's good, I mean, I have a witness right here. These two incredible brothers, that to me is a study, right?
I mean, it's just as Commissioner McCary said, there's stuff that we know and we can tell it works. We still got to figure out sometimes how it works or why it works. That we got to keep doing even as we move forward fast.
But it does work.
Some of those, I mean, absolutely, some of those treatments absolutely work. You can see the testament here. Yeah.
I'm trying to get the answer, because it either works or it doesn't. I would think that there's...
That's the other thing, is you'll oftentimes hear very... I'm going to put the music back on because I'm too ADHD to talk without any music. You'll hear very, like, it works or it doesn't work. Which isn't really how drugs work. Drugs can work. However, every drug that you take or every medication that you take has something called risk-benefit. Risk is essentially, there are side effects to all medication. There are side effects, especially as you up the dose of medications. Some medications are more toxic than others. So what's the risk to the patient versus the benefit that we're getting? So a drug can work, but it can also kill you at the same time, which at that point, it doesn't work. I mean, it works, it treats the thing, but it kills you slowly but surely, or maybe sometimes quickly. So do we consider that working, or do we consider that not working? And this is another thing you'll hear a lot of people say, like, oh, it worked for me. Drugs are also variable. So having one or two people doesn't make a study, which is something we're going to talk about when looking at how to actually find studies that we can rely on and like cite and reference. Because you want to look, when you're looking for like actual information and evidence behind things, you want to look and understand how significant is the study size. I don't even think we need any. Let me see. I'm going to close all of this. The other thing to note is that there's a little bit of a caveat in this, and that's drug scheduling. So drug scheduling refers to the like how addictive or how much abuse tendency is there in a medication. So a lot of times we'll have medications like heroin, which are Schedule 1. And what Schedule 1 is, it's the highest, most abusive, like most tendency for abuse medication that you can think of. It's something that you can't study without specific federal approval in a specific federally regulated study. And it's something that's not used in treatment at all. Now, do you want to play a little game here, chat? Who wants to say, like, heroin is the most commonly referred to Schedule 1 drug outside of marijuana? for some reason. You know, you got LSD, cannabis, ecstasy, peyote, heroin. One of these seems a little bit out of place. And that's sadly just from like the war on drugs and leftover from there. But it always is funny to me because it's not been changed in so many times. And every president has talked about trying to change it, and it's still never been changed. But drug scheduling, and the reason I'm bringing up drug scheduling, is it does limit the amount of studies that can be done, especially for psychiatric medication. Things like LSD and ecstasy and all of that have studies that are being worked on currently, but because of how restrictive it is to get a study funded like that, there's very few of them, at least in the United States, personally, like in the United States. So when we're thinking about like a breadth of studies, we need to consider scheduling, sadly, but you don't really need to know too much about that. This is all kind of just introduction into what we're talking about, and then we'll get into the actual like reading through a publication and talking through how to understand and like how should you read a publication, because there's a lot of text and they're very hard. So to do that, we're going to take our first gander into the ibogaine study that people were talking about. So this ibogaine study was done out of Stanford University, specifically in the brain stimulation lab. Let me recenter. There we go. So you have a whole list of authors here, and this is another important thing to check when looking at studies. So the first thing you want to read is the title, right? Titles are very grand and oftentimes long in science. I don't think we write titles the best. So titles aren't really going to be your best indicator of something, especially for like an actual publication like this. And it's important to know that this publication is peer reviewed, because you can see there's specifically a DOI that links to, in this case, Nature Medicine, a well-respected journal. And you can see that by just kind of Googling. There's like Nature Medicine, Science. There's a large amount of journals, but what we want to look for is not just one study. One study is good, but you want to check and essentially see, are there multiple studies saying the same thing, or are they contradicting? But to do that, you kind of need to be able to go through the study. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now. The first thing that I would highly recommend every person read is the abstract. Abstracts are essentially the TLDR of science papers, in which it's a quick, short summary talking about what the problem is, what our application is, and what's the results. So in this case, ibogaine, we're looking at specifically ibogaine therapy, or magnesium ibogaine, in veterans with traumatic brain injuries. This needs to be shifted. There we go. So the abstract is going to start off and talk about traumatic brain injury. It's a leading cause of disability. Traumatic brain injury is basically when you've hit your head, like past concussion. It's a very like kinetic, kind of like you've hit your head and there's TBI now. That's not a very good description, but I'm trying to put it in the most layman terms ever. You can see there's a lot of like terminology here. Traumatic brain injury, PTSD, depression, anxiety. I mean, that's not it. PTSD, special ops forces, stuff like that. They oftentimes will define the terminology very beginning. So the easiest way to do is just kind of read through it initially. So in this case, we're looking at traumatic brain injury as a leading cause of disability. I don't even know what that's supposed to... See, like if I don't know a word, you can Google it. It's a pathological condition resulting from disease, injury, or other trauma. No, you learn. If you don't know a word, Google it. It's the best thing. I have sat down, and even in like my 7+ years of research in science, I still have to Google things all of the time. Don't be afraid if you don't know a word to Google it and just like figure out what it means. So basically, it's like an injury can include functional impairments, psychiatric symptoms such as PTSD, depression, anxiety. So what we've done is we've introduced our main topic and we've set the problem. So our problem is TBI. TBI leads to different psychiatric syndromes. Now we're setting the population in this case. So it's special operations forces, veterans, SOVs may be at an elevated risk for these complications, leading to some to seek unexplored treatment alternatives such as ibogaine, a plant-based psychedelic compound. So this is essentially just setting up the problem as, hey, TBIs exist. Here's what they cause. Here's our population that we're looking at in the study, and here's why we're looking at this. They've sought out this treatment because current treatment for PTSD and anxiety still is lacking. And that's just a little bit of off-the-cuff knowledge that I know. But you can always kind of go down this rabbit hole. And the idea of when I say rabbit hole is you'll start with one article and then ask a question and start with another article. But the best place to always start is the abstract. Abstract is just going to give you everything that you need to know. Well, not everything. It's going to give you the nitty-gritty of what you need to know. So you can see ibogaine has been associated with instances of... I skipped a few lines. It's a plant-based derived compound known to interact with multiple neurotransmitter systems that have been studied primarily as a treatment for substance use disorders. That's a whole lot of jargon. Figure out a way to essentially convert these into non-jargon. So it's plant-based derived compound. So it means it's from a plant. Known to interact with neurotransmitter systems. If you ever hear neuro, it's brain. Transmitter is just how things go between the brain. The idea is you want to get this into a way that you can understand and explain. And the basis of this sentence is that while they use a lot of large words for it and like a lot of jargon, is essentially this plant-based psychedelic has been studied as a treatment for substance abuse disorders. So addiction, addictive tendencies, things like people addicted to a certain like narcotic. It's being studied for those. It's also, though, and we're setting up another problem here, associated with fatal cardiac arrhythmia. You don't need to focus on cardiac arrhythmia, just focus on the word fatal there. What this is saying is that there's toxicity with this drug. And this kind of is, like, you go a bit line by line, and what you can do from this is derive why something's being studied, what is the purpose of that medication, or it was the purpose of that technique or that method or whatever you're looking at, and what's some of the risks from this. And again, this is all just in the first, what's this? 1, 2, 3. This is all in the first 3 sentences. So the abstract's already giving you a pretty good understanding of all of this text in the paper. Now, we're going to get into that text in a little bit because it's important for science literacy, but we're going to start with the abstract because it's going to be your first, like, is this study the thing I actually want to look at? And a quick side note here. If you look up, like, studies, the things that you're wanting to look for is going to be more like National Institute of Health, like PubMed, direct journals like Nature, institutions, so EDUs, stuff like that. You're not going to want to click on like blogs, or oftentimes not going to want to click on news articles unless they're actual science. I'm trying to find a example of like just a random blog. Let me just look up ibogaine instead. That would be way better. Yeah, don't click on Reddit. Don't click on Reddit. This is not a good source. This is not a good source. Just know. If you're actually looking for like something that is factual in nature, you want articles, like actual peer-reviewed studies. And peer-reviewed studies will follow these very similar formatting. Alrighty, add time. So we're gonna take a little bit of water here. I would be curious if anyone can still hear or is in the chat of like, do you have experience reading scientific publications, like understanding them at all? Because I feel like most people get most of their data through the news, either mainstream or now probably for our generation, like social media and stuff like that. And that can be a good introduction, but you'll get a lot of things that I really wish people cited this. Like citing sources is great. Like every time I try to do a video, I'll try to cite my sources just because it allows you to actually go back and look at the study. Look at that. I forgot. This is very nice. Little clinical trial page. Sorry, we're waiting for the ad break to be over. Give it like 30 seconds. Drink some more water here. And like, sadly, there's been, especially in the recent years, I think more science has gotten into like the public sphere, which is not a bad thing, but papers like this aren't really easy for the public to read and understand, which sucks. I think scientific articles should be more tuned to a generalizable audience than they actually are. But that's just personal opinions. It's also why I'm streaming talking about how to read scientific articles, because I kind of think general public knowledge and general science communication is very important. Same with science literacy. But now that the ad break is over, we can kind of get back into talking about this abstract. And again, the best way to do this is go line by line through the abstract, understand, and if you don't understand something, look it up. Like if I was unsure what neurotransmitters are, look it up. You can, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo, NIH, there's a bunch of really good stuff. So you can see it's chemical messengers that your body can't function without. They carry messages from one neuron to the next target cell. Basically, it's how your brain transmits information. So if you don't know something in an abstract, or you don't know something in the paper, just Google it. That's the really nice thing, is we have so much information at our fingertips that we can, if we don't know something, learn about that something. Though this does take a little bit of time. So once they kind of set up the problem and like set up some of the backstory in an abstract, normally they'll shift towards what the study is. So you can see in this present study, we're looking at an observational study of magnesium. So magnesium and ibogaine, like a combination. An observational study of magnesium ibogaine, the Stanford traumatic injury to the CNS protocol, a whole bunch of words. But here you can see, now we're getting the population. 30 male SOVs, so Special Operative Forces veterans. Let me see, with predominantly mild TBI. So already we have a patient population, 30 people. Normally for something to be considered statistically sound, you want 30 or more. 30 is when it can start to be considered like a normal distribution, which if you think about like height's a normal distribution. There's some people on the low end of that, which are shorter. There's some people in the middle, which is the average, and most people are in the middle. And then there's some people on the far end, which is really tall, like me. And you kind of get that, what's considered like a bell curve. The idea with normal distributions is it captures the overall population, including some of the outliers, but also majority of the average. Now, things to note with studies is you want studies, like this is most likely what's considered a prospective observation, so it's a preliminary study. And you can tell that this small patient group is an initial like, hey, is there something important for us to study here? Once you get into like actual clinical trials, it's upwards of 100 to 200 plus people. And it's also a lot more diverse because you want to understand in like male sex, female sex, you want to understand across different like socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnicities, etc. You want a population that is representative in your sample size of the overall population, like everywhere in the in the area that you're interested in. So in our case, this is the United States. But this is a small initial pilot study. It's a prospective observational study. So they're talking about here the changes in the baseline, the outcome after treatment, and then additional outcomes for like PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Here is where they get into the results. So let me see, what is the MISTC? It's the magnesium ibogaine, the Stanford traumatic injury to CNS protocol. So MYSTIC. I like when they have fun acronyms. I love, as a scientist, make fun acronyms. Fun acronyms are great. They also like draw people in, so MYSTIC is great. Resulted in improvements in functioning both immediately, 1 month, and after treatment in PTSD, depression, and anxiety. These P's are basically probabilities. We're not going to talk about that today. It would take so long to understand probability. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the pretty pictures. And this is like a sounds really dumb to say, but one really easy way to understand, and this isn't the only way, this shouldn't be the only thing that you do, but one really easy way to understand the results of a paper in like a very quick like look and understand is by going to the results and oftentimes looking at their figures. So we're gonna skip the main and kind of break down how all science articles are framed, right? Let me see. Let's look up Organization of Science Manuscripts. Yeah, this. No, not that. No, not that. Science articles are, yeah, here we go, are broken down into like very similar organizations across all sciences. You have an introduction. Well, first you have the abstract. The abstract is kind of outside of the paper, but it's the little paragraph that we just read, right? You have your abstract, and then it goes into introduction. Introduction is where you provide, here's the problem, here's the history of the problem, here's what research has been done before, stuff like that. The introduction is going to be very hard to read if you're not in that field. And what I mean by that is, like, we can go back and look at that paper we were just referencing, right? Let's look at the introduction. TBI is a leading cause of injury-related disabilities worldwide and is likely to remain so until at least 2030. It's also a significant injury of U.S. veterans, stuff like that. Ibogaine is derived from the root bark of the Tabagreen agaricus shrub, related plants, and is traditionally used in... There's a lot of jargon in the introductions. Which, I mean, you have to have. It's how papers get reviewed and published, and if you don't actually provide the backstory in, like, a sciencey way, you're not going to get published most of the time. But introductions for a person not in science is going to be very hard to read without understanding a lot of other things. So while it's important to read through the entire paper, and this is the big takeaway of this, read through the paper. Even if you don't understand everything, you'll understand some things and you'll catch things that they'll say. Because often, the amount of times I've had people come to me and say like, oh yeah, I read that study. And then you get to like the conclusion of the study and they're like, we didn't prove anything. And people are like, but look at this, they proved things. No. Read the entirety of the paper. Even if you're not going to understand everything, it's going to be hard to do so. Reading the entirety of the paper is the only way to be really scientifically literate. But we're giving, the entirety of today is giving you the tricks and tips on how to do the first pass of like a paper. So first pass is like, get the main takeaways. And then you read the entire paper. And reading the entire paper, it's just going to suck. It's just going to suck. It's not fun. I'm a PhD student. I have to read so many papers. It's not fun. There's some that are like nicely organized. You're like, ooh, fun. There's some that are really interesting. But they're long. Papers are long. You're not going to understand everything as well. And don't get disheartened or discouraged about that. That's another like really important aspect of reading science, is not to get disheartened by things you don't know. Because unless you're quite literally the author of that paper or an expert in that field, you're not going to know everything in that paper. Even if your field is tangential, you're not going to know a lot of things in that paper. So if you're a non-scientist reading a scientific paper, you're not going to know a lot of things. And that's okay. It's okay to not know things. It's okay to have to Google things. It's okay to have to like look back. It's okay not to fully understand a paper. But you should be able to at least, through like the abstract, some of the results and figures and all that, get some key takeaways. And you should be able to understand the plain English definition. So while you might not understand, like, if we go back to this, up, there we go. You might not be able to understand like what the Tabernathe igoba shrub is, and they're like N-methylate, D-asparate, K, and U-opioid, yada yada. You can understand some of the plain English things. So therapeutic dosing leads to dreamlike states of consciousness. That's pretty plain English. Ibogaine is classified by the controlled substance as Schedule 1, indicating there is currently no acceptable medical use or and high potential for abuse. Plain English. There's going to be a lot of jargon. It's a science paper, and that sucks. But you don't always have to know the jargon to understand the paper, which is really nice. So back to the kind of like continual overview of how papers are normally laid out. After your introduction, which is a bunch of the theory and a bunch of the jargon, you get into the data and pre-processing. So this is things like, here's how we collected the data, here's what the study is, here's our patient population, stuff like that. And we'll talk about each of these individually as we go through. Depending on the paper, data and pre-processing is going to be in methods or results, or a combination of both, or it might be in results and discussion. But it's a pretty similar flow of introduce the problem, abstract, so TLDR of the paper, give you the key takeaways, the key problem, very quick, short paragraph, easy to read. Then data processing, or introduction, which is the big, long theory. Then you have data and pre-processing, which are things like methods, how we did things, which if you're not a scientist, methods aren't going to really be great for you, except for like maybe data processing for like a clinical trial. Like, here's our patient population. Here's the variability of ages. Here's the variability of like how many years it's been since they've had a TBI or whatever. Then you can get into the results. And again, I think as a non-scientist, the easiest way to do things is abstract and then into the pretty pictures. Pretty pictures and pretty tables are a really big thing that science reviewers harp on for good reason. A lot of people won't read the entirety of the publication, but they'll look at the images and they'll look at the results, and having that displayed in a very easy to understand way is extremely important. So after we've gone through the abstract, and again, this is from our first pass of the paper, right? We're still going to read the entirety of the paper. That's, again, if I cannot stress anything enough, it's always read the entirety of the paper. But we're going to go ahead and start with just the abstract and then into the results. So for our results, you can see we have demographics and we have a nice little figure. So here's how they did their demographic selection and like exclusion criteria. So they had 34 screened before enrollment, and then they had one that did not qualify the study entry criteria. This is like their, how do we get the patients in the cohort? A nice little figure. Again, easy to understand, is a figure that you can follow. It's a flow chart. We've all learned flow charts pretty early on. So you can see that they had 34 people that were screened, 33 initially enrolled, and ultimately 30 were eligible and completed the baseline and post-treatment assessments. Cool. There's your patients. And then we get into the table. And this is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Tables are one of, if not your best friend in science research publication. Tables and figures. So here is laying out what the patient population is. So we have a total number of patients. And this is like a 2-column table, by the way. So we're gonna go for the first column. We have a total number of patients. We have their median or their mean range. So the average range plus or minus some value. So what this is essentially telling you is, here is the demographic of the study. Here's what we looked at. Here's the patients that we've looked at. Here's how many we looked at. Here's how many that had a diagnostic of PTSD. Here's how many that had a diagnostic of anxiety. Here's the race and ethnicity. Did they have an alcohol use disorder? Stuff like that. This is really important when understanding overall studies, because this also allows you to understand, does this population apply to me and the global population? Not global, but like the national population. So this is a rather small introductory study. So it's used as a pilot. So it's not going to apply. It's not going to be many people. It's not going to be the most diverse of studies. But this tells you, okay, here's the baseline demographics that we need to think of. And then we get into the research. And again, what we can see, I'm trying to like handle the vertical display. I'm hoping I'm keeping up with that. Apologies for people watching on vertical if I'm not. Here is where you're gonna get into like a lot of the nitty gritty data. Like you can see these tables are gonna be very hard and confusing. So let's look at the very first pretty figure. Ooh, pretty figures. So what is this pretty figure telling us? Let's start at the top left here, and let's start also with this. The pretty figure subtext. So A through D is baseline and follow-up results in the different studies. So what these are is essentially, you have baseline, which is your control. So this is what we compare everything to. You have your post-treatment, so this is right after treatment, and then you have your 1 month layer. And what you'll see is on pretty graph, You can see each of these lines represents a patient. And then you can see that there's a trend in some patients, trend in upper, down, and around. Each of these are specifically talking about disability assessment scores, their like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. This is not the prettiest of graphs to look at, but it is a pretty graph. Here is probably the main takeaway, if I had to guess, from this paper, is going to be graphs like this. These are some of my favorite graphs if you look at like actual papers in general. They're called box plots. Violin plots are kind of curvy box plots. That sounds weird to say out loud, but it's not entirely incorrect. Violin plots basically will show the percentage by just going woo when there's more people. So if you just curvy box plot, that's such a funny thing to say. But studies like this, or plots like this, are very easy to understand. You can look at this patient group in the baseline. You can see how they did post-test and how they did 1 month later. And what you can see is that you'll oftentimes see these like significance, stuff like that. And you can read the figure and understand this. Figures make things so much easier. Because what this is telling you is it's showing you the data in a visual and easy to understand way. Like as a non-scientist, you can tell this group has a higher percentile than this group because the box is higher up on the y-axis. It's again, that sounds like it's demeaning, but it's not. I, as a scientist, always look at the figures first. Figures make my life so much easier because it makes it so much easier to understand. We're gonna take a small break because there is Twitch ads starting. So we're gonna do a little bit of like, breathe. We're gonna take a mental break. We're gonna take some water. And then we'll continue onwards after the ads are over. And while that's going, I'm gonna randomly scroll and like look at other ways to kind of illustrate this. Okay, cool. I want to talk about that. I'm gonna talk about that. I should talk about this. That's something I'll bring up in a second, but don't worry. Do they not have a... Oh, I guess their discussion is their conclusion. Okay, cool. Neato. Okay. Man, I can't believe I finished work today, having read publications and even writing my own one. And I'm like, you know what I want to do for fun when I get home? I want to stream and read more publications. Gosh, I really must hate myself. It's a self-fulfilling cycle here, shit. Alrighty, ads are just now finishing up, so we'll give it like 5 more seconds before we get back into it. We'll give a little recap on what happened and, you know, go from there. I think this is good. Like, I really enjoy science literacy, and I think it's very important. Honestly, I might do more of these. If I'm gonna do a stream like this next time, I should plan it a bit better. But that's irrespective of the matter. Awesome. Okay, ads are over. So TLDR, what we've done, we went to the abstract, then we looked at pretty figures. Again, the figures here are going to be the easiest way to actually understand this. I want to talk about being wary of, as someone who doesn't know statistics, being wary of saying like, oh, this is significant or not, and being wary of what significance really means. Because I can say something is statistically significant, but that doesn't always mean that it's biologically significant or physiologically significant. A great example of this is just because two things seem to happen at the same time doesn't mean that they cause each other. And this is a big pitfall people constantly love to spout with. And I think this is a great example from the Tylenol causes autism thing of, oh, autism and Tylenol happen, like people took Tylenol and autism happened. There's a correlation between these. question is correlation, or not the question is, but like the main thing is correlation doesn't equal causation. One of my favorite websites is called Spurious Correlations. It's by Tyler Vigen, and essentially what it is it's things that are correlated, but you can kind of go, yeah, they're not causing each other. Like the popularity of dumb ways to die meme and the number of electronics engineers in Utah. The graph go up at the same time, graph go down at the same time. Clearly it's correlated. But it doesn't mean that it actually is causal. Like the number of phlebotomists in Minnesota versus arson in the United States. Something that's like clearly not causing each other, but it shows correlation. So when we're looking at an image like this, or even when we're looking at that figure we were looking at earlier, it's important to understand that just because something is correlated doesn't mean they're causing it. And I would be very careful looking at like data like this as a non-scientist, because it's very easy to misinterpret data. While it is important to be able to kind of read and understand data, the easier way to do things like this is to look more at visual figures and visual representations when you're a non-scientist. And then to kind of read why is my mouse cursor just completely gone? There we go. Or to then kind of read what the authors of the publication say. So we've looked a bit about this, like there shows correlation in the decrease and stuff like that. Let's talk a bit about like some of these other ones. A nice important section, safety. No unexpected or serious treatment emergent side effects. Cool. So you can see that they talk about like the safety and all of that. Now that we've looked at and seen pretty figures, the next thing I would recommend is go to discussion or conclusion. So again, what we're doing is we're just very quickly making our way through a paper in a way that we can easily understand before making a whole read through of it. So depending on the paper, it's going to be called discussion or conclusion. Conclusion is essentially the main takeaway messages. We've shown you the data. We've talked about the problem. Now, what's the takeaway from this study? So this is a rather longer one because it's a discussion as well. Sometimes they merge discussion and conclusion together. Sometimes results and discussion get merged, and then there's a separate conclusion segment. It very much just depends. But in summary, and this is a nice thing because it's a summary, we prospectively investigated the safety and efficacy of this, magnesium ibogaine therapy for a specific patient population with a history of TBIs and yada yada. You'll find a lot of fluff, but if you kind of go to the last paragraph, they'll normally summarize like their main takeaway. It's kind of like the abstract, but a little nicer sometimes. Our study provides initial evidence to suggest that Mystic could be a powerful therapeutic for transdiagnostic psychiatric symptoms that can emerge after TBI. And this is why I recommend reading this after reading the abstract. It's still going to be jargony. But the main takeaway here is, considering the average time since discharge was nearly 8 years, these findings suggest that Mystic may be more effective when administered years after the injury. It gives you the takeaways, but also in the conclusion, it gives you a lot of times limitations, which is really important. Because you saw, like, in the press conference, they're like, we clearly have a patient population. Look, there's 3 people who say this works great, it's beautiful, and therefore it works perfect, right? It either works, it works or it doesn't work. One of the ways. The idea is that here we're talking about limitations, right? We're talking about this is good, but here's the limitations from this study. And this one really frames it really well. Although the current results are promising, additional research is needed to address some clear limitations. Most importantly, and discussed above, the study was not controlled, and so relative contribution of any therapeutic benefits from non-ibogaine elements of the experience, such as complementary treatments, group activities, coaching, international travel, yada, 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 cannot be determined. What this big study that this keeps getting referenced with ibogaine stuff, what this is saying is that don't take this as grounded truth. They also mention here specifically like The demographics included here are reasonably representative. A study examining the safety and efficacy in more diverse and medically complex populations would be required to assess generalizability of findings beyond SOVs. So this is giving you the, here's what we found, here's the nice takeaway, but here's how we frame the results. It's framing the results is the best way to say that. Because you can have a really good study, but there's some limitations of it. And like what this is saying is that this is not indicative of how it will always go. This isn't controlled for just that treatment. So we need more studies to do this. This is what's called a pilot study. Pilot studies are basically, is there some evidence to look further into this? What you'll often find is people will reference like, oh, there's proof that this works, right? Like, oh, clearly there's proof that ibogaine works. And they point towards this study. This is a good study. This is, what this shows is that, like many other researchers have seen, psychiatrics and psychedelics specifically have the tendency, or not the tendency, have the potential to be used as a very powerful therapeutic. That's something that I'm not going to disagree with. That's something that this study shows. But this doesn't show that ibogaine it's not making the claim that ibogaine will cure or treat this. It's saying that there's initial results that show ibogaine could be good for the potential of this. And this kind of idea of going from abstract to looking at the figures and of the data and understanding the data to the conclusion is a really good way to get an overview of the project, look at the data on what the data actually tells you, and then get the takeaways and limitations of it. Because they pointed towards this study. This is the study that, like, if you look up, let me see. If you look up, like, what they're pointing to. Oh, gosh, I fact-checking is great. Let me see. Yeah. This is also okay. This is perfect. I'm gonna keep that tab open, but I do wanna really quickly find out the one. What was the one there? Yeah, they were referencing the 2024. Cool. Let me see. So this is what they were referencing. The 2024 study, right? So this is the 2024 study we just read. Is this study? This is kind of outside of their, what I would consider. Oh, what's it called? Oh, what's it called when it's like this worked for this one person or this worked for a friend? What is that called? Circumstantial, not circumstantial. Like, I don't want to say hearsay. Hearsay is such a legal term. But it's like oh, I heard it from this, and therefore it worked. It's very single person, like tangential, not tangential. What is it called? Oh my gosh, it's going to bug me so much, chat. Like testimonial. What's it called? Ah, there's a specific term. Anecdotal. Anecdotal. Gosh dang it. It's going to bug me. It was going to bug me so much. Okay. Sorry. That's my ADHD weird ass brain go burr. But anecdotal evidence. Outside of anecdotal evidence, which they're using quite a bit. They're like, this worked for me and the 3 people standing behind me. Anecdotal evidence can be... It's okay. Anecdotal evidence is not good in actual, especially for like healthcare policy, right? Anecdotal evidence in healthcare policy is not great. You want actual data behind it. Just because something doesn't kill one person doesn't mean it won't kill many others. There's things like survivability bias. There's things like if you don't know how the person was actually treated, they could have been taking like a micro dose and not actually taking a full dose. Anecdotal evidence lacks actual understanding and is oftentimes so heavily biased by our own personal beliefs or by the chain of it getting told, like telephone. People will hear one thing and then speak it, and then another person will say that same thing, but it changes and gets more exaggerated every time. Anecdotal evidence isn't something you should listen to. Now, you shouldn't discount or ignore anecdotal evidence, especially in an argument. People will very often turn towards anecdotal evidence when trying to argue with you. Anecdotal evidence is important to take into consideration. It's an important thing to understand. You want to listen to patients who have taken things, but you also want to say, that's good, but we need more data before we can actually give this to more patients, right? Because if I say like, oh, I took LSD and it cured me. If another person takes LSD, it might not do that. It works for one person, and especially with psychiatric and psychedelic medications, they're very patient variable. So this is why we're talking about media literacy and science literacy of finding actual studies and also understanding the study's limitations and the scope of the study. Like, this study's scope was not to be a hardline truth or baseline. This study's scope was to show the potential, but not like actually be used as a genuine trial or actually be used to claim, yes, this works in all patients. If you see, they're very particular, can be a powerful therapeutic that can emerge after TBI for this, including stuff like that. You can see they're very particular in their wording. You have to be, that raise the possibility that this therapy may be beneficial in other populations. The possibility. It's not saying that this therapy will be. It's, hey, this article and this study shows this would be a good thing to look into. And that's kind of why I think this is a really good thing to talk about. Is I'm biased with the current administration. However, psychedelic treatments, especially things like microdosed LSD, in combination with others or through different new studies, have been shown to be very good in certain psychiatric conditions. But we need more studies. And the funding of these studies is really good. What's not good is saying, well, we got 3 people, so we're gonna approve it. And that's not how the FDA works. But they're putting a lot of pressure on the FDA to try and fast line these approvals, which can be dangerous. So what you want to do is you really want to understand this. And now what we've done here is we've had one study, right? So we did the TLDR on one study. Now I'm not going to walk away and say, oh, well, this one study is the only thing, the only evidence. Well, clearly there's this one study that says this. Science is about publishing data that either agrees or disagrees. If the data disagrees between studies, you look for where is the evidence truly lie. And what I mean by that is like, is this one study that's disagreeing a rare case, or is there a bunch of studies that disagree as well? So you don't want to rely on just one study. If you say like, oh, I read a study about da-da-da-da, it's not much better than anecdotal evidence. It's better because it's peer reviewed, but it's not much better. And the reason it's not much better is you're a sample size of 1. What you want to do is you want to look at other studies that are hopefully saying the same thing, or see where their discrepancies lie. So that's why I kept this open. This was like a fact checker thingamabobber. But what's really important is you'll see when they're talking about this. Let me see. When they're talking about this, they're talking about other studies as well. A 2017 one, a 2017, 2018, 2024. What you want to do is don't rely on just one paper. Relying on one paper is, I don't want to say peer-reviewed papers are bad. They're not. But you want a larger amount of evidence than just one paper. And you also want to check between the papers, are the populations the same, stuff like that. It's really important just to kind of go through and get a concatenation of evidence. And what I mean by concatenation is like, don't just take one source and say, well, this one source knows everything about it. Because that's how you misquote things. check if there's like a consensus on this. If there's not a consensus, what's different between the papers and stuff like that. Ad time. Let me pull up the other paper we're gonna go through. I wanna know what the peptides he's on, like he's talking about. There we go, 12, there we go. Give me a peptide. Don't worry, chat. We're pulling up the next like thing to talk about. So this is not actually like me talking about anything. Honestly, let me see. I want to also provide some resources to. Yeah, cool. All right, we got our next topic, like our next paper. We talked about ibogaine. That's the main one I was wanting to talk about too. To be fair, let's be honest with myself. Ibogaine is, and it's also like, I think it's really interesting. Like, it's so cool that medication was like, no, it has no medical benefits. Now, like, well, wait a minute. If used correctly, it does. And it's so sick. And like a lot of the drug stuff comes from war on drugs, but this is a good way to understand and like go through all science topics, be it physics, be it like chemistry, be it healthcare, math. Actually, don't read math. Don't read math. Don't read math publications. Math publications are, ugh. As someone who reads math publications, because I'm in the computational field, math publications are the most jargon you'll ever see. Alrighty. So, we talked about ibogaine, which is like the psychedelic one, right? But there's another thing that's been making headlines, specifically because this is a child, like not a pet project of RFK, but also because a lot of people like Looks Maxers really love their peptides. So before we start on this, recently RFK Jr. is now forcing the FDA to reconsider these unproven peptides, essentially. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here, but what is a peptide? Well, peptides, let me go to images here. Yeah. Peptides are just basically tiny protein strands. Oh, let me open up this in a new tab so you guys can see. There we go. This is peptides. Each of these are atoms. What a peptide is a segment or like a small chain of atoms or proteins. And they do different things. Like my research works a lot with peptide segment level resolution, which is basically like snapshots of a protein or like segments of a protein. So one of the peptides that they were talking about is something known as, here we go, Simics. And I would like to add, there's a lot of money in peptides. By that, because peptides are currently being sold in a non-regulated way. And this happens a lot with things like supplements. Supplements are not FDA regulated and therefore can be sold and make claims that aren't actually valid. Let's see, can we buy? Yeah, there you go. I can go on and buy these peptides. And the issue with there not being regulation is a mixture of quality control and claims that are unfounded being used to sell them. So have you ever seen the supplement things like, yeah, this supplement cured my ED or whatever? It's like that. There's no requirement for them to actually have a study to back that up. They can make that claim and they can just sell it. So we're going to kind of go through. Let me see. I want to know what RFK was claiming about. Do they have the social media post? Where is it? Yeah. Let me see. Today we took long overdue action to restore science's accountability and the rule of law. He loves talking about how he's restoring science accountability. But bulk drug substances that raise significant safety risks. That's crazy. Of like, yeah, okay. But here's what he's saying. The FDA will remove them from category 2 and will bring them to PCAC at its next, let's look up what PCAC, Pharmaceutical Competency Assessment Center. So like you know, how adequate are these actually? In the next 2 meetings beginning in early July, where independent experts will rigorously evaluate each substance on its scientific merits using full clinical, pharmacological, and safety evidences. The action will be regulated and will immediately shift demand away from the black market, which we will follow the science, enforce the law, and deliver the clarity patients, providers, and pharmacies deserve. So, let's first understand what the claim for Cimex is. You can kind of do this about like, I don't like the, you know what? Let's look at I want to look at someone selling Cimex. There we go. Let's look at what they claim, chat. Oh, is this like an actual... Shown to possess neuroprotective properties. We'll go through that research study. I want like an actual... I don't know how to go onto the black market. Oh, there we go. Cimex dosing guide, dosage protocol, safety, and efficacy. I'm very curious about this. Oh, fuck off. What does it do? It's a non-tropic peptide. A lot of stuff there. It's classified as that. It works by Cimex is popular in students. There we go. Supporting memory, focus, and neuroplasticity, influencing dopamine and serotonin levels. You're researching Cimex. You're likely trying to balance performance benefits with safety. So what they're claiming is that it biohackers. Oh my gosh, biohackers is a crazy thing. High performance professionals. So what they're saying is that Cimex, it supports memory, focus, and neuroplasticity, influences dopamine and serotonin levels, and increases brain neurotropic-derived neurotropic factors. So this site is, as you can probably tell, a blog. Wild thing to take advice from. I would never take advice on medicine from a blog. If you're serious about optimizing cognitive performance without guessing your dosage, So, they're claiming that it optimizes your cognitive performance, right? Let's look at the studies. So, one thing I kind of wanted to point out here is where can you find actual peer-reviewed studies? You can, of course, Google it. However, you're going to get a lot of fluff like Reddit or other things like that. Two really good areas are PubMed and Google Scholar. We're going to use specifically PubMed here, in which we're going to look up Cimex peptide. And what you'll see is you'll get a large list of publicly available studies. You can see how frequent studies came out per year, which is like a nice little cool thing to see. And then you can get different things. So let's look at what we want to find is essentially I want to look for like a larger study. Let's look at the one that they were citing as well, by the way. Here we go. Was it this study? Yeah, it was this study. This is the one that was getting cited for showing the improvements. So let's take a look at it, because I think it's important. Cimex analog of adrenochromatoin. I probably butchered that pronunciation. I do apologize. Psychostimulants such as methylphenidate are currently the most common used drug for What is this? A single author study? Wait, what? Okay, that's wild. We'll see what this claim is. Oh my gosh. Okay, it's locked behind a paywall, chat. That's a big pet peeve of mine in science is paywalls. There we go. Oh, does it not have a... That's crazy. Is this... Oh, wait, PDF? Aha! There we go. No, this is not the right... That's not the right article. What sucks? This is a really big issue, is locked behind paywalls. So we're not going to look at that one because it's locked behind a paywall. We're going to instead look at the peptide Cmax affects the expressions of, no, that's immune and vascular. We want to look at Cmax for specifically the thing that they're claiming. Which, gosh dang, that's the fucking paywall one. Let's look up cognitive benefits. And again, you can just go through Google to find these. I wouldn't click on a blog post. I would look for like an actual science review paper. Cool. Oh, this one's recent. What is this? Act in Nature? What is Act in Nature? Okay, I don't think I've ever heard of Act in Nature. Ooh, I love me foundation reports too. Yeah, foundation reports are great because they also cite multiple things like this. Let me see. There we go. This is what we want to look at. Suggests to prevent dementia and cognitive aging. Cool. So let's open up this study. And hopefully we can get a full article here, chat. We cannot. I'm not wanting to log into my institution. I don't want to dox myself. And that's how they reported improved neurological function. Article only in Russia. Russian, okay. I've never heard of Act in Nature in my life. What is Act in Nature? Let's find out. I'm gonna take the last off, chat. Mechanical compressing this goal. New International Journal on Life Sciences. I've never heard of Act in Nature before. Huh. Well, all right. So do they have like the full study? Velocity, distance. Oh, this is like mice. Okay, this is not what we're looking for here. And this is the other part. It's like sometimes studies are just hard to find. Like you can search and search and search, and sometimes studies just aren't there to find. But let's look at, I want to go back to the RFK Jr. social media post, because didn't he say one in there? I want to look at the one he said. No, did he not say one? I could have sworn he did. Ooh, FDA lists uses for the first 7. Hold up. Let's look at the first 7 then. Let's look at BPC 157. So if they already have a use, then this should be probably an easier thing to find. So it's called Body Protection Compound 157. And let's find out what the claim is. Let me see. So we're gonna scroll down to find a non-peer-reviewed. Oh, there we go. Aw. I want like a non-peer-reviewed, just random study. Like random article claiming things about it. Gut health. Okay. So, what is this? The idea here is essentially, okay, there we go. Narrative review for musculoskeletal healing. This is probably what we're going to be talking about. Sick. So first things first is check current reviews in musculoskeletal medicine. It's written in Springer Nature, it looks like. Wait, what the heck? This is not... Wait, what? Oh, this is the DOI. Okay, so it's a Springer Nature. So Springer is a pretty well-known journal, stuff like that. You can always just check the validity of the journal too. You can see like their impact scores and like how well regarded they are. But let's look. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna go abstract. Do they not have? I guess they combine methods in this one. We'll go abstract, methods, conclusion. Okay. So this scoping review aims to evaluate the molecular mechanisms, therapeutic potential, and safety concerns of body protective compound 157 in the context of musculoskeletal healing. Let's look at what musculoskeletal is. It's kind of what you would think to it as: locomotor system, intact muscles, bones, joints, stuff like that. Given the compound's increasing availability, popularity, and its regulatory controversies, we sought to assess the breadth and quality of preclinical and clinical data supporting its use in musculoskeletal. So what this is known as is this is a review. Reviews are really nice. Reviews will look at a large amount of publications that have come out and kind of assess all of the findings and compare all the findings across those publications. So while you might have to read multiple papers and stuff like that when you just want to learn about a topic, reviews kind of do the reading for you and give you the data in an easier to break down form. So it's a synthetic, that music tripped me. Synthetic originally is isolated from gastric juice, demonstrated regenerative properties across numerous animal models. It activates several yada yada. Let's see, so what we're looking at here is we're gonna scroll to, I don't want the methods, do they not have like conclusions here? There we go. Human trials. So we're gonna scroll through like down to the human trials, and we're gonna try to find the nice pretty pictures, Chad. Oh, they don't have pretty pictures. That's wild for a review article. Or is it just no pretty pictures because of the way we're looking at it? Hold up. No, I had to log in to be an institution for that one. All right, I guess we don't get pretty pictures in this one, Chad. So you can just look at the human, like the text for this one then. Fortunately, there have been limited in vivo clinical trials. So in vivo is inhuman. Clinical trials is also inhuman, like studies, to demonstrate the effectiveness. To our knowledge, there have only been 3 published studies: a retrospect on the effectiveness of knee injections alone to the knee. There's another peptide shown. So yeah, different peptide for anti-inflammatory properties. 16 patients were contacted to review their knee pain symptom improvement. I want like do they have like a table? Gosh, I don't like this study for an example of this. I would say find a better study. The hard part with peptides is they're just not well-studied drugs yet. And like, peptide therapy is such a, like, let's look up the studies for peptides. Yeah, using compounding may present risk. Oh, okay, yeah. So peptides are quite literally just used to make other drugs as well. When reviewing nominations for bulk substances proposed to be included in section, bulk drugs, substances that maybe includes could be placed in category 2. Let's see, can we find it? Did they already remove it? There we go. Oh, right. That's the big thing about peptides is they just don't know. I want to know what like the original. I want like their original view of it. Because sometimes they'll like, so I'm trying to find what it was prior to the FDA shifting it. FDA, let me see. Has removed the bulk drug from substance category 1 for the reason provided. how it has been removed because the nomination were withdrawn by the nominators. However, the FDA has announced its intent to consult the PSAC. Oh, so its nomination was just removed? Nomination was withdrawn by nominators. Okay, so this is just an instance where there's not studies on these drugs, chat. And this does happen. And at that point, what you do is, I mean, to be fair, you ask for studies. You do studies. Like doing studies on medication, preclinical and clinical, is extremely useful. That's weird. Okay. You see, view safety and risk concern with compounding. For a summary, included category 2 as well as bulk substances. Or, oh gosh. I'm not going through all of those, chat. Not what I want. I want the... Yeah, here we go. Another study pointed to the Simax improving neurological function. Another study 110. So this is like a nice little... from a foundation, like a research foundation. We're going to go back to this. And we're going to look specifically through these. These are honestly, what are they called? White papers? It's something like that that are easier to understand. So 24 healthy subjects, increased rest... I'm sorry, I stand corrected. Yeah, little human evidence to provide safety. Mini preclinical, stuff like that. So let's see. It was reported to bind in rat, but not for 24 hours. It was also reported to bind. This is not a good example of this. I'm sorry, chat. Oh, there's like no studies on this, really. Improved neurological function in stroke patients when added to their standard care. Abstract only. Another study in 110 patients reported that the treatment with Simax increased plasma BDNF levels. Treated patients with high BDNF have an improved time of rehabilitation. Abstract only article in Russian. That's wild. So there's like no data to support any of the claims that these actually work. And that's another thing that you might find. Someone might make a claim that these drugs work, but there's no data to support that. And that doesn't mean that they don't work. It just means that we don't have enough inference on the data about its safety or efficacy to actually make those claims and to move forward with dosing patients. At the end of the day, a very big perspective of this and a very big like understanding of drugs is you don't want to dose patients unless you can adequately say by giving it to them, it will not harm them. And we do that through preclinical trials and like studies where you essentially do animal models and a bunch of studies prior to say like, hey, if we give this to a patient, they're not going to have like a very bad reaction. And if they do, we're there for them right at the time. Death in clinical trials is very low. It's not impossible, but it's a really important thing to limit and mitigate. So when there's no evidence of a clinical trial, like of a study done in humans, even as like a preliminary study to say, hey, we should study this more, making claims like, oh, it's great and does all of this is just relying solely on anecdotal evidence. Which I can hear an anecdote about something working great, but oh, geez, fuck, Colic, you scared the shit out of me. Hi, Colic! I can hear an anecdote about something working great, but it doesn't always mean that it does. See, can I type? Is that how I... Hi, how are you? Chat, you guys don't know Kolek. They are an absolutely lovely, lovely friend of the stream. Highly recommend checking them out. How's it going? How have you been? We're doing science and media literacy today. Yippee! This is such a funny thing to like have my streamer friends come and say hello on. Let's go. We love science and media literacy. So we were talking about two of the main headline ones and specifically how to like actually read a publication. Because that's important. But yeah, so when there's kind of going back to what we were talking about, chat, when there's not evidence in human or even evidence prior that there's that the claims that for the claims that are being made, at that point you're just arguing against anecdotal evidence. And anecdotal evidence doesn't prove anything, but it also doesn't really disprove anything either. I can give an anecdote about I can give an anecdote about how I got struck by lightning twice. The odds of that happening are so slim to none, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. They're slim to none, but it's non-zero. So something working for someone in an anecdotal form doesn't always mean that the person's lying about that anecdotal evidence, but it's not a thing that you can base claims on. And it's oftentimes what's used to base claims on, which is really disappointing, and you can't really argue with that. So the best thing for you to do is to look and see if there's studies actually showing the evidence or the claims that they're doing. Are those studies actually like properly done and controlled? Are they pilot studies like the one we talked about with the ibogaine, where it's 30 patients and they're specifically saying like, hey, this is a good prospective study, but we need more study? Or is it something that actually maybe is studied? Like, if there's multiple studies showing the same thing, then cool. Drugs just take a while to get to market, especially with the concerns of toxicity. So by kind of going through and being able to read through publications, and again, best takeaway if I've taught you guys nothing is abstract, results, and with the pretty figures, and then conclusion. And then, of course, please read the full paper. Again, do your quick pass through to get an understanding, and then read the full paper. You're not going to understand everything, but you can understand the plain English things in it. And it'll give you a lot of things that people miss when they just take the headlines or just listen to what people say. The nice thing is we are so much information at our fingertips in this day and age that we can go back and fact check what people say, but those facts have to come from an actual credible source and actual studies versus like anecdotal evidence. If you just take anecdotal evidence, or if you just take a study that was done in like one person, you can make whatever claims you want. And that's what people often do. Credible sources are always going to have exactly. Peer-reviewed journals are great, but again, don't just rely on one either. A single study can be random chance, even depending on the patients. Rely on multiple studies that show the same thing. If there's always going to be one study that says something else, but where is the consensus of evidence coming from is another really good way to look at that. So it's being able to just read through, even if you don't understand everything, to get the key takeaways from publications like this is a really useful skill to have, especially in a day and age where we get so many claims from so many different places. I think that's like genuinely, this has been like a very weird stream to kind of do because it's majority wise just like teaching. But I think I kind of got across the main points, and I don't want to make this VOD too long because I want people to actually be able to watch it. So I think, chat, we're going to end the stream here with kind of like those two main examples that we went through. I do apologize, Calla, because you just got here. But yeah, I might honestly, I'll probably do more of these streams. I think kind of doing repeats of this when there's new things would be really good. A big part of what I want to do as a PhD student is promote science literacy and being able to understand things. So I think this is going to probably be a repeat style of stream as more claims come out. This one was really just based on because they made the whole Joe Rogan and all of them in the White House about ibogaine. And I was like, I want to talk about that. And I wanted to spin it in a more productive way than just me ranting about like science data and pointing at the like red string board like, can we talk about the Mayo Mac? I've been dying to talk about the Mayo Mac. So chat, thank you guys very much. Honestly, IBM research is interesting. No, it is 100%. Like there are studies, like the whole thing that we talked about is there are studies that show its potential, which is awesome. Like a lot of psychedelic research, a lot of psychedelic medications have potential for therapeutic use if like used in the correct manner or used with cofactor. But the claims that they're making right now are too catch-all. They're making claims that are not supported. There is the possibility for it to be really useful and beneficial, but you have to do the actual studies. And kind of going back to, we're gonna rope it back to the let me see. Yeah, we're gonna rope it back to this topic in this video one more time. The actual scientist standing up there gave the best answer
on Saturday, and I think he
me see.
moved heaven and earth to get things done. I do want to emphasize this is something that we're still studying, and we have to keep studying. We have to figure out.
They have a lot of data overseas with positive results for patients. One of the things that they expect to roll out without experts to help administer treatments. So there's also positive results in the United States, to be fair. One of the things that we looked at was the Stanford study for specifically veterans. But there still needs to be more studies in a more diverse group before you can actually like put a type of drug like this on the market, and especially promote therapy and treatment with it. And which is like kind of, again, I think this is what I really want to end off with here is something that we talked about earlier, but this
we don't just
response.
Take it for granted. We already know everything because we don't. And for the NIH and for ARPA-H, we are absolutely committed to making sure that we keep studying it, keep getting the best gold standard science on it. You see here Norvolka, who's my National Institute of Drug Abuse director. She's been an absolute hero in just developing scientific. So the commitment for American science to focus on this, and in many ways, it's that scientific advance that brought us to this moment. So thank you, President Trump.
But if it's good, we want to get it fully approved fast, right?
I mean, for the things that have great evidence, and that's what
Because,
the
these studies, they go on for a long time, and if it's good, I mean, I have a witness right here, these two incredible.
His claims are correct. If stuff has good evidence, and that evidence carries it through the trials, we want to get that approved. Because it means, especially, it means better treatment for patients. This is why we talked about this, is these claims of like, we have people here who say it works, aren't actual evidence. So, listen to the scientist in the room, please. He's very eloquent, concise the way he's speaking. Yeah, no, it's, I believe that's is that the head of the NIH? Who was that? Yeah. Is the NIH director. Who has like MD, PhD. He has actual science background. So, again, studies are good. Being able to understand those studies and not just go, oh, they've shown a positive value, because the studies they're pointing to are like, they say we need more studies. The study needs to be applicable to the general population. The TLDR at the end of the day is, and this is a very grim way of thinking of drugs and medication approval, but if a medication is not properly tested, the difference between a properly tested medication being administered and an improperly tested medication could be grandma sitting at the dinner table. A wild statement, a statement that we talked about during COVID, though, of actually having studies and data to back up the claims that are being made is what keeps patients alive and keeps patients from being harmed by those medications. Anecdotal evidence doesn't do that. I think that's a nice thing to end off on here, chat. Like I said, in the future, when there's more kind of like more instances where this comes out, where people are talking about like drug approvals or anything like that, we'll go through the publications at that time as well, I think. I think it'll be extremely good to go through like we did with the Ibogaine publication. But until then, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. If you do see public health, yep. My stream deck decided not to work, so I can't be a seamless transition. If you do see some public health things you would like to share with everyone, we do have a Discord. And with that, I will end off the stream for today. And take care, stay healthy, and goodbye.